So while this session has overcarried a bit, we are a bit late, but no worries because after this session we are not having any session in this hall. So the next moderator and panelist will have enough time. But also, meanwhile, the table is being arranged and the nameplates are being put there. We have this session which is being moderated by Neha Agarwal. And this is regarding climate action and the financial aspect of it, and how to finance all the climate action initiatives that the world and we have been talking. And this will also explore how financial innovations, regulatory evolutions, and blended capital can become key enablers of a net zero and climate resilient future. So, I hope all of our panelists are in the hall. To start with, I would ask Ms. Neha Agarwal to join us. She'll be moderating the session. She's founder and director of Lightroad Ventures, and that's a strategist, and she's a strategist and advisor on sustainability-led investment, helping organizations navigate ESG frameworks and impact investing with precision and purpose. Also, may I ask Mr. Tarachand, head of CSR OakNorth, and co-founder of the Indian Association of CSR, Mr. Tarachand, if he's here. Okay, so next, we also have Ms. Mitali Nikore. She's founder and chief economist, Nikore Association. I think I saw Mitali here. Mr. Tarachand? Okay. Hi, welcome, sir. So Mr. Tarachand is a sustainability and ESG professional, and he's a driving force behind sustainable finance strategies that align corporate intent with community impact. And we have also Dr. Madhu Verma. She's senior economic advisor at IORA Ecological Solutions, and she's former chief economist at WRI India, a pioneer in environmental economics, bringing decades of experience in ecosystem, service valuation, and green policy architecture. Welcome, ma'am. And may I also ask Mr. Simran Grover, founder and CEO of Center for Energy, Environment and People, CEEP, to join us on stage. Simran Grover. Okay. Mr. Simran. Please, sir. So I think except Mitali Nikore, all our panelists are on stage, and Neha Agarwal, our moderator, is already on stage. So while we can wait for a couple of minutes for Ms. Mitali, and maybe Neha can have some informal chat with the panelists. She's coming. Okay, that's great. So, hello. So please welcome Ms. Mitali Nikore. She's founder and chief economist, Nikore Associate, and she's a celebrated economist whose work at the intersection of gender, finance, and climate policy has been reshaping development frameworks across sectors. So now we are all of our four panelists and moderator, and this I won't take much time, and I will be handing over the entire session to Ms. Neha Agarwal, and she'll be taking it forward from here.
Can we have this light a little dim? Is it possible? So yeah, I think we can start the panel now. So, a very good afternoon, everyone, and a big thank you to the CSR Universe team for, bringing together this whole panel and the event on climate within CSR. So, that has been a great achievement where so many speakers talking about climate, which is the next big thing, which is where we are seeing already climatic changes happening in Delhi to all over the world. So thank you so much for that opportunity to CSR Universe and the Casca team. I'm very thrilled to welcome you all in this exciting conversation on climate finance today with a very esteemed set of panelists coming from a very diverse background, from Tara from CSR, to Mitali coming up from the, different backgrounds, and, from public economics, then Monica ji from ecological sciences, and with government, Mitali ji, right? Madhu ji. Yeah, sorry, my bad. So Madhu ji from the ecological sciences background and Simran from the research and the policy advocacy background. So wonderful. So I'm the founder of Lightroad, and Lightroad is an impact financing platform, which is particularly into designing and implementing of these solutions to bridge the funding gap, between across various sectors, particularly from education to climate to health. And at Lightroad, we have seen one fundamental truth, which is where in climate specifically, if I talk about, is where the the idea is that. The problem is not about only the lack of capital, but it's also about the de-risk or the structuring of the capital and how it reaches out to the solutions which are where the capital is needed, right? So we have had the first hand experience in Lightroad working across various climate financing projects, ranging from coral reef restoration in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, to working on plastic revolving grant funds, again in Southeast Asia, and also working on the EV financing facility. So across all of these initiatives which we have been doing, I've seen that a mixing of capital coming from probably a philanthropic donor, with that from the private capital coming from NBFCs or banks becomes really important, so that we see that how the beneficiaries, maybe MSMEs to micro entrepreneurs, etc., can get that access and that affordable capital which is required eventually to bring scale into the whole ecosystem and then eventually bring in the impact. So in this today's session, we're gonna deep dive into top three things. A, from where the climate financing is coming up. B, how we can create financial structures to de-risk and scale the investments. And C is around how we can make sure that the climate finance actually reaches out to the right beneficiary and to the last mile as well. So, I would want to quickly deep dive, but before that, a little pearls from the audience. So, how many of you here are working in the climate or the sustainability side? Maybe with a raise of hands. Wonderful. How many of you are from the funding, maybe private, maybe public, or maybe CSR? So we have few, Abida ma'am one being there. And then how many of you are from the NGO segment or communities working towards climatic changes or actions? So wonderful. So this is what we need to really, all three players, like from private capital to the philanthropic capital and the NGOs coming together and work upon solutions to make it more impactful. So going back to the panelists out here, so I would like to understand from all of you, what are the most promising sources of climate finance you see, both public, private, and what do organizations need to do differently to access and scale them more effectively? So probably we can start with Simran out here. Yes.
Sure. To begin with, I think it will be good to outline that what are we financing. Right? Climate change is not an isolation issue, but very much part of the meta crisis and poly crisis, right? So it's at the intersection of historical, structural, social issues, and it's sitting at top of it, further marginalizing the marginal in many ways, right? When it comes to climate finance, of course, then there's the adaptation, there's the resilience, and there's the action or mitigation part, right? Now, what we are financing, what we're looking to finance, that's where then the solution matching or the finance matching can be done accordingly, right? So I'll not go through all of it because I'm sure the panel will comment on it. But fundamentally, coming from people's sort of lens, I think resilience is very important. Everything, negotiating everything when the crisis hit, you need to have certain capabilities. And I think that capabilities can be delivered if we deliver better wages to our people, right? India has still not signed the ILO Convention on Living Wages. We are still stuck on minimum wages, and there also private sector negotiates that via the bar, right? It is a question of political negotiation where wages are revised at the state levels after many, many years, right? They don't often keep the pace of inflation, match the pace of inflation across the country, right? So that's one. The other, I will say, is the money we already have, right? Unfortunately, I think climate action is a very, in my opinion, it is a very private sector and infrastructure heavy sort of discourse. And there's a lot of imbalance there because of very obvious reasons. Leaving that aside, even then when it comes to public spending, it is again very infrastructure heavy and not always necessarily yielding the jobs that it promises, right? For instance, we have Kota Barrage and Kota Riverfront project, which is basically a cement project again, not necessarily green cement to begin with, not that it matters, but also largely in a project of exclusion, right? That's a place which possibly laborers of thermal power plant, which it borders, could have sit in shade and enjoyed a lunch, but now it is a 20 rupee entry fee. It's also a project of exclusion, and I will assume in a heat stress, it reduces the spaces of the workers to take a break, right? So I think we need to be more sensitive and empathetic. There's enough, there's maybe not enough, but there's also a lot that we can do better with. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
One of them was titled as Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. And when we say biodiversity and we talk about climate change, they're two sides of the same coin, you know. And without biodiversity, you can't address climate change, and when climate change hampers biodiversity is the solution. So the demand for actually finance would start from why should you need, where it is needed, when it is needed, and how much it is needed. So I think very important thing, the first step, what we call in the TEEP studies tagline or the moral of the story is measuring what we manage. So you want to manage climate risk, you want to manage climate change, you know, we want to create adaptation, mitigation, interventions, but we should know the extent of it very well. That's what I realized, that is lack of information, data on the extent of climate change or impacts, extent of climate risk. So first of all, we need to measure these sort of happenings and the extent of damage being done. Of course, lots of things go on, but still there's a lot of sort of inconsistencies in terms of information, in terms of data sets, in terms of techniques of capturing this information. I think that needs to be done first. And having worked all my life in the government sector, I was in the Indian Institute of Forest Management, which was, I think they forgot to introduce me. That's my major, my bread and butter for the past 35 years, and then I joined WRA, and for the past 2 years, I joined Agroecological Solutions, which the name itself suggests to provide solutions. So we worked hugely on this particular sector, and forest was, of course, the focus because we were part of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and looked at all these aspects. So did a lot of valuation studies to understand the extent of damage, the value of climate change, first of all. Then accordingly, you have to fetch, because it's like selling your house or giving it on rent. You have lots of features to decide what should be the rent of the house, its location, its kind of construction, its vicinity, accessibility, a park close by. Many such factors, decide the value of your house. Similarly, value of climate change, how it is impacted upon. And then being part of the government, having seen various sources, because always the brunt goes on the government. The government has to do everything. Government has to do everything. But we all are users. We are all beneficiaries. We are all stakeholders in the system. So stake means your extent dependence and interest on something. When we have dependence and interest, why should we or not contribute? So I would recommend very strongly the domain or the mechanism of blended finance. It is the era of cooperation, alliances, togetherness, unity. Without that, you can't, can't take the challenge. You can't, crack the sort of a problem that you're facing with. So I think it's an era of public-private partnership. And of course, you rightly said in the very beginning, you add philanthropies to it as well. Because we have talked a lot about, philanthropies, and they are not just doing philanthropy, they have to be materialistic in terms of converting the philanthropies into some kind of useful outcomes, which is we want to see reducing climate risk in the system. So this I think, to begin with, measuring, first of all, the extent and impact of climate risk, accordingly demanding, and then looking at the mapping across the sources, because everybody gets impacted by that. Why not everybody should contribute? We talk so much about our rights all the time, but nobody talks about responsibilities. I think we need that kind of blending as well. It's not just finance. At every step, blending is required, cooperation is required, togetherness is required to take this challenge forward. Thank you.
So I think, first of all, a big thank you to the organizers, the CSR Universe, M3M Foundation, and the others for inviting Nikore Associates to be part of this panel. I think I completely agree with ma'am. Blended finance is really the way to go. But even in that blending process, what is our current challenge? I think that is something we have to fully understand and grasp for just 2 minutes. When we get, proposals, and I've been an advisor to the World Bank, to ADB, and then now to some of the CSRs and to the foundations, the larger foundations. See, there is only a small set of capital that's available in the system. And a lot of people are competing for that same capital. Of course, environment is one of the major focus areas, but then there's also in an ESG universe, there's also a number of social projects, which I'm sure a lot of the CSRs here would resonate with, that, having a social project gives you quick results, which you can include quantitatively in your CSR reporting, in your discussions with governments and in discussions with other stakeholders, to sort of show that, oh, we've trained 10,000 people, with the same amount of money that you would invest in, for example, the conservation of a particular region, a particular area, and the land issues that are also involved in these conservation efforts and these conservation projects often deter CSRs from sort of coming in and saying, oh, should I go for this project versus a more social kind of project? So I think that's a first decision-making point. Second is that even if one goes for a project which is more climate-focused, which is more conservation-oriented, for example, that is only one type. Within climate, you have a number of actions that you can take. Mitigation actions, adaptation actions, resilience actions, many of which are related to infrastructure. Now, this is where the role of a public sector finance, complemented with finance that is coming from international organizations like the World Bank and the ADB and the others, actually takes center stage, because these are infrastructure projects which will have longer term impacts. But now there is a huge possibility, interest, and space for CSR to become meaningful partners in these projects. So one concrete example is, we were working with Sterlite, and Sterlite has a conservation project in Maharashtra, which is mostly funded by the World Bank and the government of Maharashtra. But Sterlite is coming in as a livelihoods partner to say that, the community which actually owns that land and that space is being trained in green skills and agricultural resilience by a team that is then financed through the Sterlite CSR. So, through these kind of partnerships and blending, as ma'am has said, we can really actually take it to a point where there's a meaningful impact on the ground, because the amount of money that's coming in from each partner is limited. The amount of money that would come in from even a government is today limited. And CSR, of course, cannot commit those kind of, large funds, large amounts in one project. So that is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, for climate finance. The second biggest challenge is the risk profiling. So typically when we are talking about climate projects, we're talking about returns which will come over a very long period of time. we might not see those 10,000 people trained by next year, right? We might see the results in terms of, say, the water table improving in a particular space only after 5 years, or only after 6 years, or only after even 10 years. Now, these kind of horizons being so long is okay for governments and for international donors and for institutional donors. But for CSR, I think there's some amount of work that needs to be done to understand that, okay, it's a larger foundation, maybe they can take that kind of a horizon, but for smaller CSRs, maybe they can't. In that case, in order to actually mitigate the risk and de-risk the project, you need to have a government partner, and you need to have a partner who's coming from a larger entity. The third thing is the limited availability of climate finance instruments per se. A climate finance bond, a climate finance foundation, a ring-fenced fund, for example, which is entirely for investing in adaptation projects or mitigation projects or resilience projects, which is thematic or even subsector focused, is currently not in place in India. Whether it's government contributing to it or CSR contributing to it, it's so much easier for CSR to say there is already, like for example, PM Cares. It's one of the most favorite instruments for CSR to invest in, because it's clear. They don't have to do the reporting, they don't have to do the monitoring. They can come in, they can contribute, and they can exit, which is absolutely fair. If you just want to be a donor financially, you should have ready instruments to plug into. So that is something which I think in the market, really need to come up. And again, the government has a role to play in that. I know, ma'am, you said that every time we are saying government, but these are few areas where government actually has a role. And once this institutional structure is in place, or once this financial instrument structure is in place, bit of regulatory, frameworks are in place, then it is much easier to de-risk and then attract funding.
Yeah, all the panelists have said most of the things. What I believe that the large scale changes can only come through government funding and funding from the multilateral and bilateral organizations. What CSR or philanthropic funds can do, they can create a model which can be adopted by the government. But the challenges which I see, in case of Blue Smart, it was a very good, successful, model. But due to transparency and, lack of governance, such kind of issues, and government organization like IREDA, IREDA is a public, enterprise. And such kind of organization, they invested in that organization so heavily, but at last, they are going through such kind of crisis. So, I think if we have such kind of models where there are possibility of effectiveness being successful, then I think people would be willing to invest in those solutions. We are working with Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi. He talks about gross environment product. Gross environment product, GEP. He has introduced a concept. He fought cases in the High Court of Uttarakhand, and the Uttarakhand basically announced that the state government should measure GEP, how much water they have given back to the nature, how much forest they have given back to the nature. So such kind of measurement is very important. Yes, CSR people, they look for what kind of impact they have created. And these days, with, it has been over 10, how many years? 15, it's around 10 years that law came in picture. And since then, there has been a lot of changes in the mindset of the people who are managing CSR. They understand, even government has, made it, that we can do 3-year plus 1-year projects, 4-year projects we can do. So, and 4 years is a good time to, even if you are working on all kind of, whether you are working on water conservation, whether you are working on biodiversity, whether you are working on, other kind of issues, 4 years is a good time to see a change. But the issue is, we do large scale plantation, but how to ensure that, that plantation is not given to the other donor? So are we using the technology which builds trust and transparency in the system, and makes the organizations more credible and the initiatives more credible? So I think there is an issue basically. But definitely, philanthropic funding and CSR, we have only 25,000 crores. Okay, and India's, if you want to meet the targets, you need, I think, 10-15 billions of rupees to address those climatic risks. So it is like peanut. So what we can do is we can only and there is also an issue. The law says that we can't take in any benefits out of the investments we are making. So if we are working on a carbon farming projects, we can't take carbon credits. Yes. So that is like a and when board, it also says that we don't want to take any kind of risk. They are very clear that for us it's a charity. Sorry to use the word charity, but board things like that. We don't want to take that kind of risk that we'll be funding such kind of program where we'll be taking credits, or there are some regulatory issues. So people don't want to touch such kind of program. That is another reason. Yeah.
So I can't agree more on that, but just to go back to Monica's point that yes, one, there is a lack of instruments, and second, as Tara said that 25,000 crores is there, then how much can we put, and then we can't take credits. So actually there are a lot of innovative financing mechanisms which even I at Lightroad is working upon. Just one example I would like to give is of the EV financing facility. So which is generating livelihoods for the micro entrepreneurs who are the e-rickshaw drivers. So what we are trying to do is, we are trying to blend the CSR capital with the private capital. So I mean, across the panel, we discussed about the government's role, where there's heavy investment in the infrastructure side of the climatic projects. But projects like these, where the micro entrepreneurs who are the drivers of e-rickshaw are not able to get loans, because they're new to credit, or the mechanisms are not full-fledged. So CSR actually can play a very important role there, where they can act as a risk guarantor, which is like a FLDG, for the NBFCs who are actually not catering to that segment of these e-rickshaw drivers, so that they become loanable. And the NBFCs, which is a private capital, with the help of the CSR or the philanthropic capital, can actually reach out to those segments and give them loans so that eventually they generate livelihood through the climatic changes of e-rickshaw. At the same time, talking about the carbon credits, right? So there's a more innovative mechanism to actually use carbon credits eventually. So whatever carbon credits gets generated with the savings through e-rickshaw can actually go back into the pool of that risk guarantee which a CSR donor is giving, rather than going back to you, because certainly there will be regulatory challenges there. But that FLDG pool which we are creating with the help of the CSR capital can be reused and redeployed. So from that perspective, there can be multiple cycles of loans which can be given with the help of the CSR capital to these micro entrepreneurs in generating livelihood through climatic actions. So, these kind of innovative financing mechanisms actually cater to all the problems from the CSR lens perspective as well, where you have limited capital and the impact needs to be created more. So here you get 20x leverage directly, because if you give 5% FLDG, you are getting 20x leverage right away. So similarly, you're using private capital, which is having a perceived risk and not catering to a segment. So we are unlocking that private capital and eventually making it to a mainstream eventually if we see good use cases out there. So certainly, we saw that climate financing is a challenge with its own limitations. So thanks for that. So to Dr. Verma, I would like to see, you have such a extensive experience. You mentioned working with WRI to the government at a larger extent. So what are the key challenges that you have seen in mobilizing sufficient financial resources to meet the urgent need of the climate mitigation and adaptation, specifically in India? What is your view on that?
Thanks for this very interesting question. I'll come back to, in fact, I would say, first of all, let me also say that as such, I don't see there's much dearth of funding. funding is available, but it's related to channelized in a right way, and also use it in a manner that it goes to the ultimate beneficiary of that funding. You know, it doesn't get locked in on the way. The whole value chain of funding, I would say, requires to be addressed very clearly. So there's a, first of all, as I mentioned in the beginning as well, there's lack of understanding about the need of capital, the amount of capital that is required, and the purpose for which is needed. And of course, the whole kind of data sets which are available, the lack of transparency, monitoring systems, they're all, you know, kind of sort of not so strongly organized. I'll start from the CSR. You know, still, I know we're talking so much about climate, the environmental aspects. We still call this pool as CSR, corporate social responsibility, mainly meant for the health and educational purposes of, you know, of the populations of the people and the villagers, because they need to be, you know, compensated for the damage being done, need to be capacities need to be built for education and health sectors. But I would take a little, you know, I wouldn't say tangent, but the sector which I come from, because I worked all my life in the forestry, wetlands, grasslands, Himalayan mountains, and interestingly on tigers. So there's such a domain, such a gamut, such a, I would say, spectrum of, you know, sources from where funding can be sought, funding for which funding can be sought, I would rather say. And the whole landscape, you know, the whole landscape is available. And we focus more on, in terms of course, you rightly said about there's a lot of urban issues to be addressed in terms of, you know, transportation issues and, you know, renewable energy need to be brought into the system. But I would also look at when you look for climate financing, which is basically done by, of course, reducing the pressure on so-called stock resources and also creating renewables, like for example, doing restoration of forest and recreation, more plantation to be done to capture this thing. And you need climate finance because they address, you know, climate in a very big way. I just come back to you, Tarachandji. In fact, you may or may not be knowing that been working this domain of valuation for past 35 years, and I am the one who has done this GP study for Mr. Anil Joshi. And it is a gross ecosystem product is the value what nature provides to you. It's the value of natural capital, the green capital value that you get. That's what I'm trying to point out here. Because there's so much focus on just, you know, climate financing. Climate is just one particular, I think, I would say, indicator in the system. There are many more things happen when you, so for example, restore forest, to do conserve forest, you do plantation, you reduce, you know, emissions. Not just, you know, one benefit comes into being, which is, you know, providing finance to address the issue of climate change, but the whole gamut of co-benefits come into being. As I said, biodiversity is one of the important one. Let's take an example of tiger conservation in the country. I'm just connecting, you know, because we are now bringing a lot of interest has come of corporates on investing in conservation of umbrella species, not just tiger, rhinos, and, you know, talk about a couple of others, dolphins we invest, because these are the top story animals and species in the system, like directed to the system. We call it umbrella species. In Hindi, umbrella is a kind of a chhaya, chhatra chhaya, I would say. When you protect tiger, protect habitat of tiger, I would say, you create so many other benefits also in the system. Climate is just addressed as one of the, you know, impacts of investment, but there's a multiplier effect comes into being because of that investment. So when you protect when you conserve tiger, you conserve the habitat of tiger, you conserve water, you conserve soil, you conserve, you know, animals, you bring biodiversity in the system, you not just address carbon, you address GHG emissions as well. So many things come into being, and that's what we demonstrated in our work, which I did for ministry and a couple of states that you just mentioned about, to value nature first of all. And then try to, this carbon, addressing carbon is just one trigger. It leads to so much multiplier effect in the system. If you're able to actually express that in totality, then you attract the, you know, interest of corporates and others. So working greatly on, you know, with National Tiger Conservation Authority, and there's an international agency come into being. It is the International Big Cat Alliance. So much interest has come on account of tigers in the country. I tell to my students, if you Google India's website, 3 T's, letter T's come in front. First is the Taj Mahal, second is tea, which is chai, and third is tiger. Anybody coming to India would not go back without experiencing these 3, you know, things. So there's so much of interest, and then when you conserve it, a whole lot of things come on account of it. So so now we are just getting the interest of the corporates. We had international conferences held, and we had people from 40 countries visiting, and they showed interest in conservation of big cats. And we are bringing climate finance to tiger reserves of the country. We already have signed MOU with International Big Cat Alliance, and we are also working with the National Tiger Conservation Authority to bring this finance, not just for addressing the issue of climate change, but also multiple issues and multiple benefits coming out of it. We talk so much about cost. Our discussion is always cost heavy. This is the cost of, I work on true cost accounting. I just come back from Rome, and we had a true cost accounting forum at Global Forum at FAO. And that's what I try to highlight. When you address, it is restoration cost, it is opportunity cost, it is maintenance cost, and what I call is a cost of inaction. If you don't take action in time, so much impact of climate change have to be felt. If you stitch in time, saves 9 kind of thing. But at the same time, when you are investing these costs in the system, what kind of benefits get generated? That's what is the key for bridging climate finance or any kind of finance in the system. So this is what the story is all about, and not just talking about forest. We are going beyond forest. We are talking about wetlands, we are talking about land as such, grasslands, mountains, coastal marine ecosystems. We talk so much about blue carbon these days.
Absolutely.
We talk about teal carbon, which is the carbon in the land area, but in the wetlands, but which are the coastal areas. They are the repository of a huge number of benefits. And they can fetch, they have such mechanism of capturing carbon. We did a lot of work on Sundarbans. I just finished a study for World Bank, 2-3 studies rather. And we focus so much on getting these benefits by capturing this carbon in the system. And plus couple of co-benefits. So I think to raise money to attract the interest of CSR, first of all, of course, you rightly said, government is, I would say, like a mother industry. Yeah. When government gets established, all the ancillaries and satellite industries come into being. Correct. So the government is the one which controls the policy, which controls the institutional mechanism, which controls markets. So if government is a kind of major trigger or in the system, and then other things start getting attracted. So then when you do this, definitely I would again use a platform to say, must change the nomenclature of CSR as CSER. Corporate social and environmental responsibility. Generally, it will make the difference. You don't understand. CSR still, mindset is education, health, and all these sectors. So and that's what we demonstrated. When I do valuation, it's not just talking about economic benefits. We talk about ecological benefits, social benefits, cultural benefits. You may be aware. I don't know whether you know or not. We have one of the biggest, I would say, sacred grove in the country. In Meghalaya, a place called as Mawphlong, is the biggest forest grove which is worshipped. And look at the wonderful cultural mechanism of conserving our resources. Conservation International Agency worked out the benefits that you get from it, as I was just trying to mention. How much biodiversity we are conserving? What is the value of carbon that is being captured there? What is the value of provisioning of water from there? What is the value of landscape? It's like a punk cut, you can see forest at the top, the rest is all, barren. So this is what we try to highlight, that what it leads to ultimately, and then it is coming forward. We just had, my colleagues are sitting here, big studies going on in Meghalaya, where we are able to get Econ Rabobank investment, millions of dollars being invested in restoration and conservation of forest. And it is multiple things that you do and then bring back. Similarly, we were doing a big USA study on landscape of tigers, where we are connecting tiger reserve with the corridors, and we brought in we have to match the funding that we were getting. Huge amount of money has come in Madhya Pradesh, where I talk about Madhya Pradesh in the morning in the previous session. I'm from the Bhopal, and I know the ins and out of the state definitely. And huge money has come up. The corporates are showing interest in these unusual areas. You must also explore these, not just look at all the materialistic ones, which are also equally important, which are more important rather, I would say. But we don't know the hidden values of these invisible things. So that's what my lens is, to provide visibility to all these invisibles. That's how you will make the case interesting for investment in addressing the climate issues. Not just material things that you look at, apparently, but the invisible ones need to be brought in front. Then only things become more interesting, more inviting, and they make the difference.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Verma, for sharing these examples with us and helping us rethink, how we can approach climate finance. Just to share an example from the work which we are doing, and you talked about the biodiversity piece as well. So at Lightroad, we are, working for the restoration of the coral reefs in Southeast Asia. And, what we are doing there is we are giving returnable grants to the organizations who are working towards positive reef it can be sustainable this fishing to ecotourism, etc. So these organizations who are working towards restoration of coral reefs, and they are the ones who are not getting the financing directly. So there are international funders who are helping them get the first level grant from them, so that they can build their credit history and they can become loanable in the near future. And these are returnable grants, so once the work and the impact is done, they have to return it back as well to make it more sustainable in the future. So absolutely, I think this is how we need to really rethink and the approach on climate financing going
But
forward.
very quickly, like to add two very important things. Like I talked about tiger reserves, why we were focusing so much on investing and bringing money, besides what government gives is an amount. You would not believe that we have 58 tiger reserves in the country. They are the highest top priority areas in terms of conservation, highest status in terms of conservation. More than 700 rivers and tributaries originate from these tiger reserves. They are the lifelines, they're the water lines of the country. Without them, you would not survive. This is one of the, besides the climate, this is one of the purpose of conserving this. I was trying to mention about co-benefits. Secondly, I also worked with the Finance Commissions of India, which is one of the major sources I just forgot to mention. It is the turnkey thing for me and for my life as well. I've been working for last 4 Finance Commissions. So in 13 Finance Commission, we made a case. I worked on a study where we were to work out the value of diversion of forest. What you lose when you divert a forest. We're talking about cutting trees, and in the morning we talked about. What you otherwise see as a tree log, and then you get shade and you get few things, but we worked out multiple values that the tree provides. And then I came to mind, when we work out the value of diversion, why not the value of conservation of forest? So we made a case to Finance Commission, presented opportunity cost, maintenance cost, restoration cost, total economic value of forest. It really made a difference.
Absolutely.
13 Finance Commission, the grant was increased from 1,000 crores to 5,000 crores. In 14 Finance Commission, we worked intensively. Of course, IORA joined hands with me when I was an IFM, FSI, Forest Survey of India. We demonstrated greatly using number of indicators. The amount had gone up from 5,000 crores to 1,43,000 crores. And now in the 15th Finance Commission, it went up further to 400,000 crores. Now we're working with 16th Finance Commission as well, and climate is the focus of it. So, so this is what has to be considered. Yeah.
So thank you so much, ma'am. Okay. So Tara, you have been a seasoned professional, right, from CSR and ESG perspective. So I really want to know that from your lens, what do you think CSR can play a role, maybe in the form of grant or catalytic capital in the climatic projects in India or beyond? What do you think? How they can play a role?
Yeah, definitely. As I told you earlier, CSR funds definitely create some models which can be picked up by the larger players. But I see a lot of challenges also. It's not, as I told you that, one thing is that, measuring the impact, that becomes a challenge. And also, if what Simran was talking about, that if we can link it, and ma'am also talked about it, if we can link the environment and climate change work with livelihoods, with health, with education, and it can be linked. If we can create some kind of solutions which are interlinked to such issues, then it would be more easier for CSR people to take a call and fund such kind of interventions. Like we are working with Budge Women. So they work with women farmers. So we are, helping them improving their livelihoods, and although we are helping them in, climate resilient agriculture, but we are also improving them in, helping in improving their livelihoods. So that way, if we can create such kind of models where you are working on women empowerment, building their capacities, improving their income, and at the same time, you are improving the, the type of, the way they are taking farming. So I think definitely we can, there would be more CSR professional will be willing to support such kind of initiatives.
That gives a lot of motivation to a lot of NGOs out here, working in the climatic actions. So, Mitali ji, from you, from the policy economist lens, what regulatory and financial innovations are needed to better unlock the domestic private capital for the climatic solutions?
So I think, this is a very important point that Tara ji has made actually. that we have to make multi-sectoral interventions. So at the end of the day, like he talked about, the carbon credits as well. Literally last week, I was sitting with a friend of mine who is running a real estate company. Now their CSR budget would put literally a lot of the smaller, it's massive. And they actually have a mandate for replanting, right? They have to replant because if you're constructing over a certain space, you have to replant those trees. First thing we noted was his replantation cannot be done out of the CSR budget, which is correct, absolutely fair. That is not unfair at all. But at the same time, if he wants to earn even carbon credits out of the replantation, that is also not allowed. And then on top of that, if he wants to go in and actually, invest more in conservation, which will give him carbon credits, even which he doesn't want to earn for himself, but just wants to reinvest that in the community, like you exactly said, his regulators and especially the legal team in his company is saying, no, don't even venture close to carbon credits. Right? So I think when we are talking about regulatory mechanisms, the first one is really around carbon credits. We have to make the law very, very clear, make the regulations very, very clear, make the regulations around replanting very clear. We have to have actually, a lot of systems which focus on the GPS tagging of actual tree plantations that are happening. Geotagging, because right now what is happening is that ma'am is talking about Sundarbans. Even I have a couple of friends who are working in Sundarbans who live actually in Kolkata, and they are going there and they're doing this on a weekly basis. They're actually doing geotagging audits where one CSR has invested in say 100 trees. That same set of 100 trees is being shown to 4 or 5 donors. And because the geotagging was not happening. Then they went and they started doing it, and now of course but my point is that when we began, we was in that sort of a system where, without geotagging, you can have double counting. It may not even have been deliberate. वो mistake भी हो जाता है, but at the same time, we need to have very clear regulations around geotagging. At what point do you do it? How do you upload it? How do you monitor it? The other part is around the usage of funds. Right? At this point in time, you're not allowed to use funds for paying salaries. Now, this is also a big issue because a lot of times you need to have people, especially in conservation projects, whose entire role is to stand there, work there, monitor the quality of the intervention, monitor the quality of the investment, and for that you need to pay people. So being allowed to pay some of the salaries for the direct staff who are, performing this function of monitoring and actually implementing the project is something again which we need to put down very clearly in the regulatory mechanism, if that is something the government wants to permit. And and finally I'll say, when we look at the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, we have been looking at the data and the BRSR data reporting and everything. Now in that we need sectoral reporting to be far more clear. People are not sure ki, in especially multi-sector projects, like you were saying, mera ye project, do I put it under gender equality? Do I put it under livelihoods? Do I put it under agriculture? Do I put it under, environment? As a result, the environment component gets a little bit de-emphasized because generally they end up putting it either under livelihoods or gender or something like that. So I think somewhere allowing reporting on multiple sectors and saying, my project actually has benefits of, climate benefits also, it has gender benefits also, it has livelihood benefits also. That will help us in understanding how the capital is actually currently being deployed. And that also helps the NGOs who are in the room, because at the end of the day, then you can see this donor is putting at least 30% of their portfolio on projects that have a climate focus. So, you can easily approach that CSR then.
Very valid points, Mitali ji. Yeah, Tara, you want to add something?
Yeah, so I'll say that, most of the philanthropic funding is based on trust. And so is, to a large extent, CSR funding. So if you are able to, develop that trust, and that can only be, developed when you are able to showcase the result, you are able to, have that transparency, only then you can have that trust. Absolutely. And that's how you can secure funding.
So I think then geotagging may not be required if the funder is trusting you.
No, no. It's still needed.
Absolutely.
That's why I answered that,
Regulations, see, regulatory
transparency
aspects,
is
which
very
Mitali ji
important.
mentioned,
Yes.
is absolutely the need of the hour, because that's how
Yeah.
you can also, and very valid point, Mitali ji, which you kept saying that the segment where you need to tag that project, that's how it becomes important from the NGO side as well, and from the regulatory perspective as well, that how you want to go
Yeah, so
forward.
we work with Sankalp Taru Foundation. Earlier they were not doing that, but now they have started using blockchain to, ensure that there is no duplicity. Yeah.
Clarification, Vitali, you talked about regulatory issues. It's very, very clear. What you mentioned about that if you set up an organization and you have to do plantation, it means you have diverted that region. That is a compensatory effort for which you can't earn carbon. That's not you can't earn carbon credits for that. But what you're doing restoration and conservation, then you can earn carbon credit. Yeah, yeah.
Explaining that this is how the companies are thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's a clarification required. Yeah, yeah.
Companies are thinking.
So we did a study for EIA, just quickly, because in this we clarified all these things, because a lot of confusion happens sometimes. That's what you need to do.
What one person is doing in one place is not reaching all the
No,
companies.
it is for the government. Government regulations. It gives to everybody. It goes to everywhere. That's what you need to understand. It should not create confusion, because that confusion need to be cleared. Then only clarity comes, and the finance would definitely come.
Right. Mitali, I also have some differences here. I think the carbon credit market works under the principle of additionality, right? And one replantation is not, one tree uprooted is not equal to one tree planted, right? In number of ways. Yeah. So the idea is here, if you are asking for carbon credit here, you're assuming that dollar will not be invested in another climate or green project, right? That's, I don't think is the case.
But that is the entire mindset that we have to change.
Yeah, that's education on the corporate side, I believe.
Yes.
The lack of information happens many times.
So good to know, and these different perspectives, that really helps. So Simran, your work focuses on the intersection of people, policy, and climate, right? So in your view, how can climate finance be made more responsive to the realities and needs of the local communities?
Right. Thanks. Very quickly, we work around large infrastructure, large energy infrastructure on issues of land, labor, and environment. Gender, although I'll say gender expertise is very limited in our organization right now, right? So what we understand from it is the complexity of it, right? And the complexity of it, which nobody can understand sitting here or in any government offices or CSR office in Delhi, unfortunately, right? Just to give you an instance, we work on contractual labors within thermal power plants, right? Now these contractual laborers, by the virtue of their employment, get employed in some of the most dangerous and problematic spaces within the thermal power plant. For instance, some of them will be working in a coal yard and coal handling or ash handling, etc. Right? So what we need to understand that all labor is not same, right? After 20 years of work, many of them will not be able to see, but refusing to wear a glass or acknowledge that they have a sight problem, because the day that is identified, their job card will be taken away, the entry pass will be taken away, and they will not have a job tomorrow. So that's the degree of vulnerability that many have in our country, right? This is just one example, right? And now with this is also, it's not just that they're more vulnerable in terms of the location and the jobs and the contracts, but also in terms of the caste structures, etc. Many of them, even within that, you will see the worst off will be the migrants coming from regions of Odisha, Chhattisgarh. Now these are the people who are deemed to work in coal, right? So this before we say we are going to deliver justice, we need to understand the complexity of vulnerability, right? That I think building those capacities, not just in the civil society, I think more importantly in the government institutions is extremely critical. And I'm sorry to say that no state action plan comes close to it in any way possible, right? And that comes to my second part. I think if we are, I'm talking from a systems view where the most excluded need to be included, right? So there are two things. One, I think the state capacities need to be strengthened a lot. Unfortunately, with the consulting sort of space and everything being outsourced, I'm nothing against consulting, but I think every institution has certain core function, and they should be able to do that core function. Unfortunately, I work in the distribution sector where a PwC or a KPMG is doing the business planning for them. I mean, come on, right? And that's throughout. Pickup transport is the same thing, right? Maybe KPMG will replace a consultant like me, right? Who's a not-for-profit consultant who's been paid by somebody else, right? Oh, please take my services for free, right? But anyway, I am paid for my services nonetheless. It's not free. So for me, it's the way I see it's also led to decline of institutional capacity, especially at the state level. And lastly, I think the inclusion of people, even from a CSR perspective, I'll just say that I think the complexity of ground is really understood. In the previous session, there was incident cited of an unutilized 25 kilowatt asset, right? But when we talk about reaching the marginal, right, there's the barriers of social structure also in place, right? I did some, my team actually, not me personally, but we did some research in a village of, there's a new district called Falodi, it's earlier part of Jaisalmer, where we were looking at what's happening around large renewable energy projects. And we were looking at pastoral communities, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a spatial distribution of development from the panchayat to as you move away. In that space where you have luxury cars in the panchayat, thanks to the contracts, but you don't even have an ambulance reaching the pastoral communities. And on the third day, we found out there is a community which is not even acknowledged. So how will CSR reach them, or even anybody reach them, right? Through FRA, they do have sort of certificates from the government, but the Tehsildar is refusing to register their pattas and give them the deeds, right? So I think that's the complexity that we are working in, right? And I think lastly, for this, I think there needs to be devolution of power under Amendment 73 and 74, so that people can negotiate their priorities, right? It should not be upon you and me or anybody sitting here or in the city to negotiate. And I think they will make mistakes, as we all do. It's not that government and businesses don't make mistakes, but in making those mistakes, capacities also get built, political consciousness also built, democracy gets strengthened. Thank you.
So very insightful pointers which you highlighted, Simran, on how to bring this climate financing to the most vulnerable segment and making it more equitable. So just one quick question to anybody on the panel on the innovation part. So any innovative financing structures that you have worked upon which excites you the most? Any one of you can pick up. If Mitali, you want to, yeah.
So firstly, I want to say I'm hard relating with you, Simran. I mean, so I work a lot in the gender space, right? And these kind of intersectionalities which you're talking about, the marginalization of certain communities. I mean, we can see the marginalization of women even in the communities and households with the highest income groups. And then on top of that, when you add the intersectionalities of going to lower caste, minority religion, and other marginalized groups at the edges of a city. And also we work a lot on urban mobility. So within that, when you're trying to connect the domestic workers who live in literally the back and beyond of the richest neighborhoods, it's such a conundrum. But yeah, I think on an innovative finance instrument, I would say that the entire idea of having this fund of funds, which the government of India has brought in for MSME sector, I think that is a very innovative instrument which can be leveraged for climate entrepreneurship as well. Because we are actually talking about leveraging the fund of funds for gender innovation. Like for example, having the fund of funds give you a small grant where if you as a woman want to start a business, whether it's, in a traditional sector or also in a non-traditional sector like carepreneurship, for example, and, having more and more child care centers, having more and more elderly care centers, things like that are coming up. And, these are essentially in the MSME space. I feel like a fund of funds of that kind, if it could empower climate entrepreneurs and people who want to have that sort of a impact on ground, but also want to make it financially sustainable, even with a small amount of return, that I think is a very, very innovative thing that our government has already brought in.
So happy to share that Lightroad is already working upon it. So we are working on an alternative investment fund category 2, specifically for 2 portions. One is on the skilling, and second is on the entrepreneurship in the climatic section, anything on the green entrepreneurship, right? So we are creating that fund with the RBI new guidelines coming up, blending up the institutional investors with the philanthropic investors per se, and then how we can kind of have that financing which can be given to the green entrepreneurs as well as with the skilling part. So we have already designed and on the way of implementing and registering that. Yes. So wonderful.
That will be very, very innovative. Game changer.
Yeah.
Another very interesting mechanism, what we call as payment for ecosystem services. There's so much of concentration, I would say, the entire discussion, so much of carbon-centric and carbon credit-centric. There are lots of other mechanisms which are available. We talk about biodiversity credits, we talk about habitat credits, we talk about so many other mechanisms are there which need to be brought in. Otherwise, it becomes too heavy towards climate change. Even climate change feels so burdensome to be focused every time, every problem is because of climate change. But climate change can be addressed with so many other, by blending so many other instruments as well. So payment for ecosystem services, if the communities are conserving, this is totally directly connected with the communities, conserving a habitat, conserving a region, conserving water source. So there's a mechanism of paying them a kind of a compensation. So we have a whole list of services which emanate on account of conservation, restoration, avoiding sort of damage. And then those actually compensations we ask from the community, and the companies are coming to invest in for that particular purpose. We are doing it across the country, and the other model is very successful across the globe as well. So again, I would say a little deviation, rather enrichment of the whole, portfolio. This add your focus on other aspects as well, and make it blended, and then only the problem can be definitely solved.
Right.
And climate change is addressed by biodiversity, by a couple of other things. Conserving soil addresses climate change, conserving water addresses climate change. So why don't you put everything together, and then it will be much more easier path. Yeah. And your whole portfolio spectrum is available for you to choose from.
Very, very rightly concluded, Madhuji, on how we can use blending to kind of do a lot of work on the climate side. Anyone of probably Tara, you would want to conclude on the climate finance panel which we are having now?
Yeah, so I think, blended finance is the, next thing. And definitely with that, we can create a lot of innovative models. But the kind of scale we want to achieve, that can only be achieved through multilateral, bilateral, and government funding. And
up with them as well.
Yeah,
yes.
so I think definitely, but innovation is required actually. So for the innovation, we can definitely use funding from CSR or philanthropic organizations, and a lot of organizations are doing that, right? Like Nudge is running a cohort, IIM Bangalore is running cohort for entrepreneurs working on climate change. So that way innovation is happening, and if there are more and more instruments available, then, and also, somebody was talking about educating corporates. Yes, it is very much required. We don't have expertise, So we we can't be experts of all these subjects. We are dealing with health, we are dealing with education, we are dealing with malnutrition. So I think that capacity also needs to be built. And we have 1 or 2 people, managing the entire show. So for that, I think, and in the earlier session, somebody talked about forming a group of experts which can provide guidance or, educate the professionals managing CSR. So that would be a really great thing. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Mitali ji, any closing remarks from you?
I want to be part of this group of experts. So Tara ji, please. No, but on a very serious note, I think the group of experts is a very, very good idea because what I've observed is that even in this role of people coming in on CSR, maybe they will do it for 1 or 2 years and then they will probably move on to another role within the company, and then there'll be a new person coming in, and again they face a very similar set of challenges. So for institutional continuity and also for the company values to be safeguarded, it's very important that there is a ongoing relationship with some of the experts who can of course advise. And finally, I would say that it is important that multilaterals need to be brought into these discussions. Because I'm such a big part of the multilateral world, where we are talking about World Bank, we're talking about ADB, and I've advised them for my whole life. They are not in these discussions and the CSRs are not speaking to them. So I feel like somewhere we need to create a community of practice of climate finance professionals, and even people like yourself. Of course, you are like very much into the sector, but say if RBI is working on this, it would be so nice if RBI could do themselves an information session for the CSR professionals and for IFIs, at the same time saying this is our new regulation, demystify that. Because sometimes even just with word RBI only, CSR professionals will be like, nahi, hame nahi samajhna hai. So we don't want to know. So, demystifying is important.
So, right, Mitali, but then with these administrative changes in US, let's see how the multilaterals, is going to play a role in the countries.
We got a circular yesterday on email.
Oh, wonderful.
And
That's
the
promising.
climate focus for World Bank is going to continue.
Okay.
And they have actually made the US has made a very clear statement that their support for World Bank and IMF is also going to continue. Okay. And ADB, of course, is a more Japanese funded. So, these institutions have survived world wars. They were set up to do reconstruction post World War II. So I would not doubt these institutions at all. And in fact, in terms of their climate focus also, it has been now made very clear in yesterday's statement. So I am hopeful that they now are here to stay, and especially in climate is a new area of focus for them. So they will continue to invest in that area.
But then I still hope CSR folks and the CSR funding increases in a more innovative way. Likewise, multilaterals are doing, through these blending and these structures in place. They all have to come together to really meet that SDG goals. Simran, any closing remarks from your side while,
Sure. I come from a slightly or quietly different thought process, right? See, a lot of the things that I've discussed here, I think needs to be unpacked, have a larger, broader discourse, whether it's PPP or blended finance, because it can also lead to issues of inefficiency, privatization of profits, and socialization of risk, etc. And the domain can be very murky, right? And coming from power sector, I know that in a PPP, when the private entity is bound by a penalty, quickly the public entity, does a board meeting, oh, you are free to go. But when the other way around, they're very quick to take them to the court, right? So I am presuming, I'm not the expert on it, some of the issues might be there. And even for the stakeholders, genuine stakeholders involved with the CSR companies or the level of transparency, accountability needs to be high. And I think with my experience, that's not always been the case with development sector. It's like any other sector. It's made of people, right, at the end of the day. But yeah, there's a lot of hope, and but my only contention was, the devolution of power and resources to the ground needs to be done, and that unfortunately, we are in an era of increased centralization.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for any questions from the audience? Lunch. Okay. Okay, sure. So then we will wind this up. Thank you so much for the wonderful panelists out here, the insights. I'm sure the audience might have learned a little bit more, and and see how probably innovative financing modules can be integrated further to have more sustainable climatic financing in the future. Thank you to the Casca team for having us here and kind of giving this opportunity to talk about the climate finance and have those discussions in place. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Neha, for wonderfully moderating this session. It was quite enriching to know the experiences from India and from abroad also in terms of climate financing. Now it's time to give a small token of love from our side to our esteemed panelist. I would ask Ruchika Kumar, our group editor, CSR Universe, and Ashish from M3M Foundation. May I ask Ashish to come on stage? We have, Sonal, please come with those memento and that magazine.
Okay.
So
Just wanted to share that the CSR Universe has launched a very, very valid, and yeah, it's the Green Universe magazine for the children, so that they start learning about everything around the, sustainability, climate, and I think it's the right age to engage them, to know about the crisis that we are facing right now, and how they can deal with that, and how they can share their ideas with us.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful initiative. My daughter would love it. Thank you.
So Neha, I'll start with you. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful moderator. And thank you so much
Yeah,
for always
Ashish.
having our back. I use that. Madhubani.
Thank you, sir.
Madhubani, yes, there's a community in Madhubani.
Sure.
Hand painted, and the paper is also handmade. It's a small step from our side to encourage them. I'm Mitali.
Please join us for a group photograph.
Taraji, thank you so much. I'm not, but our founder is.
So it's time for a group photograph. Ruchika, please join them. And Ashish, please also join us.
Just be careful. The lunch is being served on the first floor. You could take the elevator, and there's also a staircase. Thank you, Neha.